Welcome to MOVI-C Control Cabinet Products Basic to Intermediate Training. This is session 7, and as you can also see, it's our first lab. We're finally through all the theoretical and background sessions and ready to fire up our demo units and start spinning the motor. So what we're going to do in this activity is first of all get you acquainted with how labs work, and then we're going to move into our very first lab, which is called Getting Started with MOVISUITE. This is going to get us up to speed using the SEW Eurodrive engineering software that we use to engineer our drives. Of course, you should have this installed on your computer by this point and have your demo unit handy. I talked about that back in the beginning, so I hope you've done it. I'm going to include the link to MOVISUITE in the description of this video just in case you forgot to download it earlier. So download it, get it installed. That will take some time, unfortunately, and then have your demo unit ready to connect up and run. But let's talk about the general procedure for labs first. A few big ideas here. First of all, each lab activity is a PDF file that is linked to this video. Just go down to the description and you will find a link to a place on one of SEW Eurodrive's websites. When you click that, it will download a PDF file with the same lab instructions we use for our on-site classes that we give to employees and customers. You can then use that instruction sheet to work through the lab yourself. I recommend you print it out unless you have a multi-monitor setup. It's pretty hard to consult a PDF and work with MOVISUITE, so printed copy is generally better, but it's up to you how you handle that. So that's our first big idea. And also be aware that many labs have some pre-lab instructions or background information that makes them make sense. I'll be going through that first, if there is any. If there isn't, of course, I'll just say we're ready to do the lab. And then once we've gone through the pre-lab instructions, I'll turn you loose, basically say pause the video, go do the lab. You can do that at your own pace. And then when you finish, come back, you can unpause the video, and you will see me working through the same lab. If you had problems doing the lab, hopefully that will get you unstuck. And if you don't happen to have a demo unit and you can't actually do the hands-on activities, at least you can watch them being done and profit from that to some extent. So those are our two big ideas. Let's talk about the way labs are formatted. This is what the very first lab looks like. This is the one we're just about to do. In each, however, I try to illustrate things very clearly. Let me call your attention to a few details, though. You should always take a look at the goals before we get started, because these are the things I'm trying to accomplish with you by working through these. So you want to read the goals, and then when you're finished, go back and read them again and make sure that you feel you've fulfilled each of them. Then work your way through the steps. Everything is clearly illustrated, often with screen captures from MOVISUITE, with key points numbered if there are things you are to do. If there are multiple things to do in a step, then you will see numbered arrows, and just work through them in the order that they appear. Keep that aligned with the step order, and everything should make good sense. All right, not rocket science. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Now, I'm going to give you some very brief pre-lab instructions for this first one. Of course, the big thing is have your demo unit ready, have it connected to your PC with a USM21A USB adapter. Remember, you just plug that into the engineering connector, which is on the front of a MOVIDrive technology. That's the 9-pin D-shaped connector. Plug the other end into a USB port on your PC, and you should be ready to go. All right, that's all you're going to need for this lab, but there are a few things I'd like you to remember. First of all, dangerous voltages are present. Remember, I've told you that most VFDs have about 480 volts AC present on the input connectors and also the motor output connectors. And the DC voltages are much higher, close to 700 volts. They're present on the DC link connection points. If you exercise normal caution, you should be fine, but these VFDs are not toys. They are serious industrial machines. They definitely can kill you or injure you if you are careless. So treat them with the respect they deserve. Do know where the e-stop button is. If you've set up your own demo unit, then it's your responsibility to make sure you've connected up an appropriate way to stop the VFD quickly if something unexpected happens. And you shouldn't have to reach through a forest of high voltage wires. You should have an e-stop button somewhere that you can reach it fast and shut things down. Do be aware there's more than one way to do things. I'm going to be showing you the most obvious way to do things in MOVISUITE, which means I'm not going to be showing you a lot of shortcuts. Shortcuts are usually harder to remember, although they're more useful because they speed up your activity. Since I'm showing you things that you may not actually put into practice for some time, I'm going to show you the most obvious way to do things so you'll be able to find your way back there in the future. Whereas if I gave you a shortcut, you'll probably forget it unless you start using it right away. But do be aware of that. There is more than one way to do things, and my way is not necessarily the best. It's just what I think is the most effective way to use in a class. And of course, do explore and find your own favorite ways to work. All right, that's enough talk. Go ahead and pause the video, work your way through the lab, and when you're done, come back and I'll work through the lab and show you how to do it. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that first lab and had good success. We're going to do the lab walkthrough now, where I will go through the steps and capture my screen as we go along. If you had any problems, hopefully this will help you. And if you're just sort of a sightseer in this class because you don't have a demo unit, then pay especially close attention because the lab walkthrough will give you at least some of the hands-on experience. Okay, I've downloaded the instruction PDF, I've printed it out. I've connected my demo unit up to the USM21A. You can see a little overlay picture here of it plugged in. And I've fired up MOVISUITE Standard, which is the free version. We're all set to go. We're on the start page just as the first step of the instruction shows. You can see some former projects I've created sitting there over on the right. Yours will, of course, be different. But we're now ready to work through our steps. So I'm just going to go through the steps one by one, kind of talk you through this. All right, I've switched my demo unit on and it's ready to go. Now you can see the language is coming up as English, but if for some reason your language is wrong, go up here to the language button, give it a click, and you can pick your language if it's not English, or if it is, of course, pick it. You'll pick the British flag there. And that's good to go. Then you can go back to start again. All right, the first thing we need to do since we've plugged in our cable and turned on our demo unit is scan and see what's out there. Now, all we should find is the MOVI drive technology because we're plugged straight into its engineering port. With other scans on other kinds of MOVI drives, you might actually see a number of things. I click from Network Scan to start. And then I pick USB because I'm using the USB adapter and I need to switch it on. And then I click Apply and Start Scan. And it's going to go out there and scan, and it found something. So now I'll click Apply. And it says it scanned successfully, so I'll close this. And it says, do I want to load device data? That means, do I want it to go out to the VFD and pull in all its settings into my current project? Now, I could say no if I wanted, if I intended to start with a clean slate, but I'll just say yes here. I don't know what's in here, whatever was set up last time, obviously. So it's transferring it into my project, and it's completed it successfully, so now I'll close. And there we go. That's my new project, and there's my VFD. It happens to be named Servo 1. That's just whatever it was from the last time someone used this demo unit. And we're now ready to start exploring. Now we are currently in what is called circle view, where everything appears as a circle with lines linking the circles together to show relationships. What you see here is the project circle, and it just got a default name, New Project 2. We'll later save that as something more intelligent. But that's the project circle, and the VFD is out here as a smaller circle, and it's called Servo 1. Now, we could change to an alternative visualization called Tree View, and the way you do it is you go up here, and you change from Circle View to Tree View by clicking here on this symbol, and that changes the project to sort of a smaller, more compact tree-shaped relationship where everything's connected up like the branches, twigs, leaves, and so forth on a tree. Most engineers I know prefer tree view because you can have more things on the screen at once, especially in a big, complicated multi-axis system. Most beginners like circle view because everything's big, easy to find, and you're usually just working with a single VFD. Now for this class, I'm going to stick in circle view because it records better, it looks better on a small screen. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to switch back to circle view. But you can use whichever you like. There's no disadvantage or advantage to any of them that's significant. It's really just how you want your information portrayed. So we're in circle view again, and we're now ready to continue. All right, so what we're going to do next is move down the hierarchy from the project view, which is the big circle, to the individual VFD, which is the smaller circle. I'm going to click on the VFD Servo 1. And we now have the VFD circle enlarged. You notice the project circle is still here, but now it's little because we've moved off of it. We see the circle. It's surrounded by shortcuts, and it's got those quadrants around the circle. It's also got the circle itself divided into segments. We're now going to do a little exploration to get comfortable with MOVISUITE and some of the things it offers. I'm going to start by clicking the top section of the circle here, the one with the little picture of the VFD. And what this does is it brings up the device data menu choice. Remember, I told you back in session 6 that it almost doesn't matter what you click. You see the same menu, but the specific menu item that you land on depends on where you click. What we're on right now is the device data menu choice. And that's because I clicked the top section of the circle, which kind of shows you info specific to the VFD. So I can see my device nomenclature at the top. I can see what family it's part of, the recommended motor power, lots of just informational things. And there's additional submenus there with other information. So that's what I get to. But of course, I could click any of these menus here, and that would be just fine. It doesn't really matter, as I've said. Once you get here, pretty much everything's available to you. Let me just point out the key areas here. These are our main menus. These are submenus. These will change as you navigate through the menus, and this is the back button that goes back to the circle. Pretty simple. The navigation is very shallow. You don't have lots of clicks to do. You can get back to any place usually in just a few clicks or less. So it's a nice streamlined interface. Let's go back to the circle view for a second. Let's click a shortcut just to see how these work. I'm going to go to the one connected to the diagnostics quadrant right here. I'm going to pick status. And this takes me to, you notice the diagnostics menu category picks status specifically. We have 4 submenus here. Here's the device status screen. It's just telling us some things about the VFD. It says it's ready, but its output stage is inhibited. It gives us some information that probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now. That will by the time the class is over. And there are various submenus I could pick as well if I want to look at those. All right, so that's how a shortcut works. It just usually saves you basically one click. Let's go back to the axis circle again. Now, all devices on a MOVI-C system have a status code of some kind. This is displayed on the front panel 7-segment LED display, but it's also available right here in MOVISUITE. There are actually 2 places you can see it. Let me point these out. First of all, if you go to the top quadrant of the circle, notice there's a little lone 01 here. That's the current status code. My VFD does not have a fault on it, so there's no little red lightning bolt there. If yours did, it would have had it. Unfortunately, mine doesn't have a fault, so I can't show you what one looks like at this point, but believe me, we'll have plenty of faults as we go along and we'll deal with them. 01 simply means the controller's inhibited, the VFD can't run, but everything is otherwise okay with it. Now, if you notice, if we go up here to the top left, it has the access name and that same code displayed there. If there's a fault or any kind of diagnostic symbols, they will appear there as well. So there's actually 2 places you can see it. We're not going to be able to check out any current faults because we have none, but we're going to go now look at the fault history just to see what faults this VFD has had in the past. To do this, we click the fault memory shortcut right here. And that takes us to the fault memory section of the diagnostics group. and it takes us to basic settings, and I don't care about that right now. Now what I want to do is look at the most recent fault. Now you notice there are 5 fault memories labeled T0 through T4. These are the most recent memories, so T0 is what happened last, and T4 is the 5th fault, so we're kind of working historically through the past. I'll just pick T0 here to see what it says, and this is kind of an interesting one. It says that there was a failure with the 480-volt 3-phase power coming in. It says line fault, line phase failure. That means one or more of the phases wasn't properly energized, and so the VFD wouldn't run. It gives the full code. It's error 06.01. 06 is the main fault code. 01 is the sub-fault code. All this information is displayed in here. It also indicates a few other things, like it shows me how many hours the drive had been running. It tells me how long the power had been applied. It tells me what the digital inputs and outputs were doing at the moment of fault. And it gives information about the motor, the output stage, and process values. There's actually a ton of information here. If you're dealing with faults, then this is a gold mine to help you figure out kind of what the system was doing when it faulted. It's sort of a snapshot right at the moment of fault. Okay, so fault memory is very useful, and if you're going back through a series of faults, trying to delve into history, then just look through them back, going to T1, T2, T3, and T4, and that will give you a picture of kind of the recent history of your VFD. I would show you the other faults, but there's nothing in them because this VFD has been freshly reset, so I've only gotten one fault on it, and I left it in here so you could see it, but your VFD may well have had other fault codes in there. All right, we're going back to the access circle. Just one more thing to do. We want to name our VFD to something appropriate to this class. I am using an asynchronous motor, and that is my assumption as to what you're using. So I'm going to change the name from servo to async1, which is a little more appropriate. Of course, if you don't have an asynchronous motor and you're going to use a servo motor, you could name yours servo1 if you want. I'm just following the instructions, and that's the kind of motor we usually use when we teach this class live. Now, how do you change the name? It's really simple. You go onto the center here where the existing name is, you right-click on it, and you pick Rename from the pop-up menu. And then you can key in a name. So I'm going to key in async1. Notice I use an underscore there instead of a space. That's just good practice. And then I click the check mark to accept it, and that changes the name. By the way, when you restore factory default settings, it doesn't clear the name. The name does stick through complete device resets, so you'll have to change that name anytime you want to change it. It's the only way. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to save our project to our laptop's local drive. We're going to be working with this project throughout the course. We will be changing to another one later on, but for now, we're going to work with this one. The easiest way to do this is to go up here to the little disk symbol. It looks sort of like those old-fashioned floppy disks from long, long ago. We just click this for save, and that's going to bring up a standard file management dialog box. Now I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to create a folder here. So I'm going to click New Folder, and I'm going to call it Class, and then I'm going to double-click it to select it. I'm going to then give my project a name. I'm going to call it MOVI-C class. You can use whatever you like, but this is what the instruction specifies. And then finally, I click Save. This saves the project, and we're good to go. Let me point something out. Once you've saved a project, the little floppy disk symbol no longer has a yellow dot on it. If you make any change that alters the project, that will change to a yellow dot, meaning there are changes that haven't been saved. If you see that, remember you really do need to save before quitting, otherwise you could lose something that you've done. Now, the VFD won't necessarily lose it, but the project will. And we're going to talk about synchronization between the project and the actual VFD in our next lab activity. But for now, we have completed our lab activity. We've done our quick tour of MOVISUITE. We've kind of navigated the access circle, and we've renamed our VFD, and then finally saved our project. That's a good start, so let's wrap it up there. All right, well, that is the end of session number 7 and our very first lab. Congratulations. We have quite a few to go, though, so see you soon in session 8.